back, guys, to Fish Tales and Shrimp Tales. So today, I want to talk about two or three different things. If I've timed this right, I'm filming this, or at least I'll publish this, and filming it, about a week or after I did the 8-week live bears video. So there won't be any surprises behind me here. Yes, we still have 4 or 5, I don't see more than 4 at a time anymore, of the baby swords, but there was a period of time there where I thought Mama had eaten all of the fish, because my wife and I didn't see any of them in here for a little while. I noticed yesterday and this morning I saw at least 4 at one given time, so there might still be 5 or more in here that are surviving. So it looks like the Java Moss has given them enough cover anyways that they can escape the adults when they're looking for food, and they do go looking. I've watched this tank pretty carefully, and they know there's babies in that area. They do go looking from time to time, but it seems that not fast enough or not smart enough to get them, or at least not get them all. I want to talk about 3 things in a roundabout way. I want to talk about what a dirted tank is, very briefly, so that we all have a basic idea of what a dirted tank is or isn't, and what those components should be, and I'll try to get through that reasonably quick. I want to talk about aquascaping and why, in all honesty, it's just not that important. It's just not. And then I want to talk about why I love dirted tanks, and what the differences are that I find from when I was previously in the hobby, doing all the things that I thought you needed to do correctly, and how that's so different from what it is today, and why I enjoy this so much more. It's just a brief overview. So I'm going to ramble a lot. If you don't like that sort of thing, then you're probably at the wrong channel, because that's all I do here. And forgive me, guys. I am still not feeling well. I've recorded a few videos. I know you probably feel like I've said that over and over again, but some of the videos I've recorded close to each other, and found out that my wife and I both have bronchitis. So it's going to take a little bit to get over, and of course, the more you talk, especially with bronchitis, the more you want to cough. So I'll do my best to keep that down so you guys can enjoy the video. I'll probably put some music on in the background, so it's a little distracting, I guess, maybe from me coughing and sniffling all the time, but I'll do my best. I've kept the lights down low today, guys. I'm very prone to migraines, and I can kind of feel one coming on right now, so I'm going to keep the lights low and try and make this enjoyable for both of us. So, dirted tanks. What is a dirted tank? Let's get through that quickly. It sounds obvious. A dirted tank is any tank with dirt in the bottom and some kind of a cap on top. Now, there are many of us in the fish hobby, and we're all doing similar, slightly different things, trying to figure out, who has the best method. For me, I think the definition of a dirted tank is pretty straightforward. It's a tank, dirt on the bottom, substrate on top. Most of us who have a dirted tank have got one that's very heavily planted, because after all, that's kind of the point, right? So if you've watched any of my videos, you know I like to use an organic potting mix. I typically use Miracle-Gro. Not that I'm trying to promote them, that's just what I use down here because I find that's what works. So I use Miracle-Gro on the bottom of my tanks. I typically put a thin layer of crushed up lava rock on top of that. So they call it like fire pit mix down here sometimes. It's small. Don't get the big stuff, guys. You've heard me say it before. Trying to smash that stuff up with a hammer is more difficult than it looks. I broke my patio, so I won't do that again. And then a substrate on top. I typically use blasting sand because it's cheap. So what should these components contain? Well, you can go all over the internet and you can get all kinds of different opinions on what your dirt should contain, what your sand should be like, and that sort of thing. So here's my very quick take on it. I use Miracle-Gro organic potting mix because I know it works. Now, my tanks aren't 10, 15, 20 years old like Father Fish's may be. So I may find very well in a year, 2, 3 years time that my tanks start to have an issue with nutrients in them. It may be that my plants start to die and I may have to rescape them because I only put dirt in the bottom, the organic potting mix. If you check out Father Fish's channel, he's got a whole method to prepare a tank to last it for what he calls a generational tank. And I love that term. I really like that term. I think that's something we should all strive for. Now, I tend to defer to Father Fish when it comes to that sort of thing. If you want to set up a tank and this maybe isn't your first tank and you want to do something that's going to last a while, even if it is your first tank, go follow his method. Go buy his supplements. I mean, he's not trying to make money off of it. He sells the supplements, but he'll tell you online how to do it. My concern with this is for the average person, for your average beginner getting into the tank, for your average child who's bugged his dad to get a tank for months on end and he's finally relented and given in. Trying to follow all those directions can seem a bit much. And most people, especially just getting into the hobby, they just want some initial successes. And it's typical in this hobby to not get that. And that's why people sell their tank after 4 or 5 or 6 months, because sick fish, dead plants, filtration issues, pick your flavor, they give up. I don't want to see people give up until you've had some success. And I don't want that success to be so complicated that it makes the entire hobby feel like you've got to become some kind of chemist or biologist to figure out how to keep fish. It's not that hard. So there is that. If you're really striving for that long-term generational tank that you want to set up somewhere and just enjoy it for years to come, and I think that's what we all want, but that method can seem to be a bit much. And I would suggest to you that if you don't want to follow his method, then I think you have 2 choices. Buy his supplements and put it in your tank as he directs, which is a great idea. Or just get into the hobby, get some initial success with the dirted tank, buy some potting mix off the shelf, put it in your tank. And you know what? A year or so from now, if you start to find that your plants aren't doing as well as they once were, I suggest by that time you'll be a better fish keeper with more understanding of how things work, and you'll have had that success enough to say, you know what? I did some things in this first tank I'd like to redo, and now's my chance to do it. And maybe you'll put all those extra nutrients in your tank and you'll follow those directions, and your next tank will be one that will last you for generations. I don't know, guys. It's just my thought. So there's that. And then there's your sand cap. Actually, before we get to the sand cap, I'm going to do one other thing very briefly. The dirt. Now, I know for a fact I've seen other people put their substrate, or at least the dirt, in mesh bags. MD Fish used to do that. In fact, if I'm perfectly honest, it's where I got the idea from. I know he doesn't anymore, and he doesn't use a lot of dirt in his tanks. He uses a NutriBase that we don't have here in Canada, or I don't think you have it in the US either. And then he puts a little bit of aquatic soil on top with a bunch of sand, and it works for him, and that's great. Father Fish puts dirt in the bottom of a tank, puts a bunch of sand on top of that, and that works for him. My issue is this. I don't want to put 4 inches of sand across my dirt. And Father Fish will explain to you that if you don't put a very thick sand cap on top, your dirt, and I think it's called the Browning effect, and forgive me if I've got that wrong, I really don't remember. Please go watch his videos. He's very good at explaining some of these more scientific things in very basic terms. But your sand will come up about your dirt will come up the depth that it started. So if you started with an inch of dirt, from what I understand, it will rise an inch through the sand. So you put that much excess sand on it so you don't have that issue. I put mine in these mesh bags for kind of the same reason. I, on occasion, will rip up heavily rooted plants in my tank to rearrange them or transplant them in other tanks for other projects or whatever it is that I'm doing. The reason I put it in the mesh bags is that although the roots can get into the nutrients, if I decide that I'm going to pull that plant out, stick it in another tank, I don't have to worry about pulling that root out and pulling up a giant glob of dirt with it and polluting my water, or leaving a big hole where the sand was and allowing dirt to come up through that Browning method through that now shallow spot. And some of these plants, especially, crypts and that sort of thing, they can have some pretty intense roots. So I find by putting it in those bags, I can then pull that plant out and I have minimal to no dirt follow that plant with it. And I think also having in that mesh bag reduces that effect of it coming up through the sand. So I can get away with a little less sand maybe. Now there may be drawbacks. Not to get too scientific with it, but there are some people that would suggest your roots will never get down to that layer because it's anoxic or anaerobic or whatever term they would. I'm trying to make this simple, guys. Tanks that I have, all the tanks that you've seen, all the tanks that I have in the house, I do the same way. As yet, I have not had an issue with my substrate leaching through the sand or the nutrient layer running out of my tanks. It may happen. My suggestion is, by the time it does, to somebody who's new keeping fish, they'll understand more about the hobby, and the next tank they set up, they can make those adjustments to have a tank that lasts them for years. I want to see you get some initial success so you stay in this hobby. So, dirt done. Talk about sand. I've seen a lot of talk online about sand, about using fine sand or porous sand or gravel. My thoughts are this: stay away from gravel. Any experience I personally have had with gravel have never been good. They've never been long-term successful. In fact, not even short-term successful, really. It always leads to chemicals and products and gravel vacuuming. However, I have seen some videos that suggest using a larger sand is more beneficial because it allows your waste material to permeate through that layer more rapidly. And I don't recall the measurements. I want to say like 1 to 2 millimeters. Maybe that's too big. Somebody did a video on it recently. I really don't remember who it was. There may be some logic to that. I know blasting sand is kind of fine. I don't know what it's like, all across the country in other areas. I mean, this stuff isn't as fine as, I heard somebody describe blasting sand as talcum powder. Not here, not the stuff I buy. The stuff I buy is still fairly grainy. It's, a lot like what you'd get off of a beach. But I guess there's a gravel out there that looks a little bit more like a sand. It's just a little bit bigger and it sort of allows things to move a little bit more. I don't have any experience with that. It might be something I try. I can see the logic to that because in my Sunkist tank, which I've recently done a video on for just an update, that'll probably come out in a couple of weeks. So, but I do get the occasional bit of mulm on the top layer of sand. And I've mentioned that before in my videos that's why I use black sand, because it doesn't show the dirt as much. I think as long as you're capping it with sand, guys, you're good. And then, of course, your last ingredient is plants, well, other than water. I think it's a good idea for anybody who's got a dirted tank. Obviously, I'm pretty sure if you have a dirted tank, your idea is to have plants, and you need to load that thing up. And when I say load it up, you really need stem plants in there. In fact, in the very beginning, you need two things, I think, for any successful tank. You need a bunch of stem plants in there, and you need some floaters. Now, as time goes on and that tank matures, you can start shifting that tank. And I do that with some of my tanks. You can start pulling out the first thing you do is you start getting rid of a bunch of your floaters because you don't want to have a lighting issue like I did. So you'll find yourself that you start pulling a lot of your floaters out and you only leave a couple of them around so that they stay in a state where there's current, always 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever in the tank. So you've always got them there if you need them to propagate because you need to take care of an issue somewhere. And the same thing with the stem plants. You may find as time goes on, especially with plants like Limnophilia sessiflora or Kabumba, which I never successfully grow. Sometimes that stuff will get a little leggy or get a little weird looking if you let it grow too long. So you find you might start taking some of those stem plants out and putting other slower growing plants in. That's fine as your filter matures, assuming you put a filter on it. But you're always going to want to keep something in there that absorbs the nutrients in the water a little quickly. whether it's floaters, stem plants, a sponge filter, canvas, whatever you got for a filter, your ground cover. But as the tank matures, you don't need to rely quite so much on your stem plants. You can let the tank settle in. So that's my thought on what a dirted tank roughly is going to be like. And I think with that particular formula, most anyone is going to have success with that. The second thing I want to talk about is aquascaping and how your tank looks. And I thought about this last night. I was looking at my tanks. And like I said, if I've timed this right, this video is going to come out just after I filmed this tank for a Live Bears update. Just before I release the video for the build of the Blue Dream tank. Excuse me. Now, there are no Blue Dreams in it as yet. The tank's been running now for 3 weeks, two weeks, I think, 3 weeks, 2 weeks for sure, since I filmed it. So by the time you see this, it will have been running for a long time, and I'll have shrimp in it by then. But as of yet, there are no shrimp. I've just added my autosinkless and my cories in this tank, and it's doing very well. It's cycling through, no issues. Plants are starting to grow, but it is probably the ugly duckling of the tanks that I have. And that's simply because it was done with whatever I had left in the house. I had some mismatched rocks and an old branch that I pulled out of the previous tank. And then whatever clippings I had available, which at the time of filming weren't many. I've added a few since, just because I did some tank maintenance. However, it's not a real pretty tank. In fact, some may argue none of my tanks are pretty tanks. Here's the thing. If you got into this hobby for the aesthetics, I would suggest that you are probably going to have a difficult time enjoying this hobby. I got into this hobby to enjoy a whole different world, and each time I look into one of my tanks, I get a peek into that world, that very different world of fish and aquatic life and macro organisms and how it all works together. Guys, what's important with an aquascape is not what your friends see when they come over or they gasp and go, "Oh, that's so beautiful." I mean, that's great, that's wonderful. Tanks, especially a tank at Father Fish's suggestion that might be considered a generational tank, are not always beautiful. I love this tank. I mean, right now, I think this tank looks great. I love the way this tank looks. I love the way it flows. I never mentioned this in the other video, but I haven't scraped the glass on any of my tanks. I don't know in how long. This one, since I set it up, for sure. And I know the camera won't pick it up, but there are little spots of algae on the front glass, and you can see where the snails and the Borneo hill stream louch have gone through and chomped on it. But I love the way this tank looks right now. I didn't like the way it looked when I started it. And I'll bet you a year from now, and I don't know, but I'm just saying, as tanks grow in, sometimes they mature in a way that you go, "Oh, that's not what I expected." So right now, I think this is my favorite tank in the house. A couple of months back, I told you the tank upstairs was my favorite tank in the house. It's just different periods that they go through, different cycles that they progress through. The tank that you decorate today is not going to be the tank that you're looking at 3, 6, 8 months down the road, a year from now. It's going to be very different. It's the only thing that's important to you when you're scaping your tank is that you like the way it looks. Your fish don't know the rule of thirds. They don't understand that it's an island tank, a 2-island tank, a triangular composition. Guys, I'm sorry, I don't even know the terms. I'm not an aquascapist. I'm an old dude in a basement with his fish talking to his phone. I don't know anything about aquascaping. I just put stuff in until I like the way it looks. And some tanks, I'll put the stuff in, I'll fill it up, I get the plants in there, and I'll go, "Oh, I'm not a fan of that." And I'll shift a couple of things around until I feel like maybe it looks a little bit better. Sometimes I'll escape a tank with an eye as to where it's going to look 6 months. Build a tank that you're going to enjoy looking at. Your fish don't care, and your friends and your family aren't there all day, every day. You are the one that's looking at the tank every day. And if you're like me, I'll come down here sometimes to feed my fish. My wife would attest to this. I'll come down here to feed my fish, which shouldn't take me more than a few seconds to put a few kernels of food in. And I'll end up down here for an hour and a half, just staring at my tanks, watching life go by. And my wife will call me and go, "Are we going out?" Yeah, I forgot. And I guess that's sort of the last thing I want to talk to you guys about. Once you have your tank set up, and I know this sounds silly, guys, but enjoy that tank. We all get into this hobby, I think, for one reason, and that is to watch our fish, to enjoy looking into a world we otherwise wouldn't see. So whatever you do with your tank, however you decide that you want to escape it, whether it's big rocks or lots of water, little water, black water, or I mean, guys, whatever you like, that's what you're going to do. And because you're the one that's doing the fish keeping and looking at that tank every day, this tank is for your enjoyment. Let's keep the fish and plants and everybody healthy, but the tank is for your enjoyment. Who cares what somebody else thinks of it? I mean, I know this tank that I put together, when people are going to see it, they're going to go, "Ugh, that's awful." It's even to me, the prettiest tank I've ever done. I know that, but it has a purpose behind it. It has rock piles in it for shrimp. It has plants in there with a lot of leaf fronds on it to create a lot of square footage for shrimp to feed off of. It's a functional tank, and you know what? In 3 to 6 months, or by the time you guys see this video, probably won't even recognize it, and I'll do an update on it at that point. I don't think I'm going to get the 3-week mark because I don't think I'll even have shrimp in it at that point. So I might skip that, and we'll just go right to 8 weeks on this tank before I do an update. I just want you guys to build a tank that is going to be successful from the word go, that you will enjoy, that you will become a part of that other world that you look into every day, and that you won't get burnt out on. That you won't get into this hobby 2 or 3 months down the road and go, "I can't do this, it's too much. I don't want to be a chemist, I don't want to be a biologist, I don't want to change water every day, I don't want to." You don't have to. It's your tank. If you look into it enough, you'll know how well it's doing. You'll know if it's healthy. Beyond that, who cares if you have a third composition or a triangle composition, or you got the wrong rocks in your tank, or maybe you don't like the sand that you put in it, or build a tank that's going to be successful. And in my experience, that tends to be a dirted tank. I've done the other tanks, guys. I've done the bare bottom tanks. I've done the old schooly gravel tanks with plants. In my past, I did all that, and I personally was never able to succeed, or at least I shouldn't say it that way. I succeeded, but I think what happened is, in chasing that success, I didn't enjoy my tanks. I had a lot of tanks. I had 70s, 90s, 120s. I had them all over the ground floor apartment that I lived in. I had all kinds of fish, and I had all kinds of setups. The one thing I didn't have was a heavily planted dirt bottom tank. It just wasn't something we really knew about in the hobby. So I chased water parameters. I did a lot of water changes. I tried all kinds of different filters. I had cheap filters. I had crazy expensive filters. And I did have success in that I kept fish alive, and I bred fish, and But what I didn't have, looking back, is I didn't enjoy it. I spent far too much time cleaning filters, cleaning tanks, gravel vacuuming, putting nutrition in the water, dealing with fish diseases. Oh my God. Dirted tanks are the first time that I've been able to just come down into my basement or upstairs or wherever the tank happens to be and just sit down and get lost in an underwater world of fish and plants and aquatic life and shrimp. Because I'm not dealing with sick fish, dirty tanks, gravel vacuuming, water changing. I just come down here and put some food in and enjoy it. Now, yeah, there's maintenance to be done on any tank. From time to time, I got a couple of plants out. Doesn't take that long. Maybe like my Sunkist tank. I think I mentioned it in that video, which is probably coming up. Probably not before this one. I've done 50% water change in here in the last month, and I'll probably do another 50%. Not because I have to, because to me, the tank has just gotten too dark with tannins. And I personally, I want it a little bit lighter, and I think it's affecting plant growth. I've got just in this room 5 aquariums. I bet I spend less than an hour a month maintaining them. I mean, I don't scrape glass. I don't do water changes. I don't clean filters on a month-to-month basis. I don't do any gravel vacuuming. I don't have to treat any sick fish. I really don't do much of anything with them, guys. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. Maybe that changes. Maybe 2 months from now, I'm going, oh my God, this is awful. I can't believe how much work I got going on. I don't think so. I want you guys to enjoy your tanks, and I want you guys to have as much success as possible doing that. And I think a dirted, heavily planted tank is the way to do it. And I don't care whose method you follow. I don't care what it looks like. And you shouldn't either. Learn to enjoy the aquarium hobby before you start trying to make it appealing to everybody. I think what's appealing about this hobby is being able to look into an underwater world. And if you can do that and you don't have to put in hours of maintenance every week, I think more people will get in this hobby and will really enjoy it. I mean, guys, just in this room, like I said, I got 5 tanks going right now. I'm thinking I might put another one down here on the desk, just a little one to try something that I've never done. I haven't had a single sick fish. Maybe I'm lucky, but I haven't had to deal with it. And if you watch the Sunkist update video next week, you'll find out all about Dum Dum and her little misadventure with wrecking herself. Enjoy the hobby for what it is, guys. Don't get caught up on composition of your aquarium. Don't get caught up on the chemists, biological, whatever. There's so much information out there in this hobby with so many different opinions. It can almost make it to the point where somebody gets into this and goes, I don't want to do this. It's just too hard. There's too much information. It really is simple, guys. Some dirt, some sand, some plants, put in a few fish. It's not that hard. Enjoy the hobby for what it is and worry a whole lot less about what everybody else thinks. I guess that's it, guys. I know it was a bit of a ramble and maybe I didn't really explain anything, but it's just an old man's opinion in his basement with a bunch of fish tanks. It sits around here for quite a while, staring into an underwater world. I ain't worrying about anything else, and I'm enjoying this hobby more now than I ever have. I also want to say one more thing. If you've got this far in this video, guys, and like I said, most of my videos are recorded well in advance. I'm probably a month ahead, maybe a month and a half at this point, guys. As you know, I've said I'm starting my own business, so I'm going to try and keep these videos coming, but they may get a little more sporadic. But I want to say a big thank you. I started doing this on a whim a few months ago, just just for something to do, really. Y'all been really great. Y'all been really friendly. You keep tuning into these silly little videos, and I think that's awesome. I hope I've taught you something, even if I've taught one person how to enjoy this hobby better than they were before. My time has been well spent. So thank you to you guys very much for tuning in. I'll try to keep these things coming, guys. I try not to be too repetitive on stuff everybody else has done before. And this video was really just my opinion. For what it's worth, it's out there. Take care until next time, guys. We'll see you then.